And there's no harm, because you do also notice that sometimes some people live far from the masjid, and the masjid timetable looks like different from their cell phone timetable now, right? So if you want to exercise precaution in that, then that is good. And there's no harm in doing so. Okay? Supplications. When you break the fast, these two du'as are considered masnoon, or prophetic du'as that are encouraged for people to recite upon breaking the fast. Allahumma laka sumtu wa bika amantu wa alayka tawakkaltu wa ala rizqika aftartu wa sawm al-ghadi min shahri Ramadan nawaitu faghfir lima qaddamtu wa ma akhartu. This is, I'm sorry, for the both for the breaking of the fast and also for the following day. So in the end it says wa sawm al-ghadi min shahri Ramadan nawaitu. And they also make an intention, because you can make that intention at nighttime before going to sleep. This actually literally means, oh Allah, for you I have abstained, literally, or for you I have fasted, وَبِكَ آمَنْتُ, and in you I believe, وَعَلَيْكَ تَوَكَّلْتُ, and in you I trust, وَعَلَى رِزْقِكَ أَفْطَرْتُ, and I have broken my fast with your sustenance. SubhanAllah, it's a beautiful dua that everything that I've done is for your sake. I believe in you, and even this that I'm eating, I recognize that in this state of extreme hunger and thirst, I still recognize that, oh Allah, this is from you. وَعَلَى رِزْقِكَ أَفْطَرْتُ, and then وَصَوْمَ الْغَدْ مِنْ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانَ نَوَيْتُ, and regarding the fast of tomorrow of the month of Ramadan, I made intention, فَاغْفِرْ لِي مَا قَدَّمْتُ وَمَا أَخَرْتُ, and so forgive that which I have preceded and that which I will, وَمَا أَخَرْتُ, I have left later for later. Then another dua, Allahumma laka sumna wa ala rizqika aftarna. Another dua is mentioned in the hadith that, oh Allah, for you I have fasted, for we have fasted. For you, oh Allah, we have fasted, wa ala rizqika aftarna, and with your sustenance, with your rizq, we have broken our fast. فَتَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا, so accept this from us. إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ, verily you are all hearing and all knowledge. Okay, the issue of the menstruation in the month of Ramadan. Number one, I mentioned one ruling regarding menstruation, and that is that a woman that is menstruating in the month of Ramadan will not be allowed to fast during those days. Number two, a woman who is in her cycle, or in the days of Hayd, will make up the missed fasts in the month of Ramadan. How much time does she have to make up the fast? And how quickly does she have to make it up? This is a very common question. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says in an authentic hadith that sometimes she would be making up the fast of the previous Ramadan the following Shawwal. Right? I'm sorry, Sha'ban. I said Sha'ban. Meaning that throughout the year they will be making up the fast. Why? Some scholars say because they were fulfilling the right of the husband. During the daytime, if the husband came to the wife, demanding, or not demanding hopefully, but asking for his right or seeking his right, then because that was the desire of the husband, some women would not fast those days, right? And sometimes they would delay the fast until the following year, right before the month of Ramadan. So it is permissible to do so, but it is always best to make up those fasts as quickly as possible. The ulama, the fuqaha, they do clarify that if there is no excuse, then it is best for the woman to make up those fasts immediately so that they can fulfill an obligation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that burden that is upon them, as quickly as possible, because that's a debt that a person has to pay. So that is what is preferred. And then one last ruling is that if the woman, of course, will have experienced most likely the first bleeding or the first discharge in the month of Ramadan, the day in which if she experiences it during the day and she was fasting that day, she began the day fasting, that day will not count and she will make up that day as well after the month of Ramadan. If there are any questions about these issues, feel free to ask them inshallah ta'ala in the question and answer session. I'm going to stop here for a few minutes and actually entertain questions for about 5 minutes. And then if there are no questions inshallah ta'ala related to what we've covered so far, we'll proceed and finish the second half of today's presentation inshallah. Anybody have any questions from the brother side, feel free to just raise your hand or to ask them. And if the sisters have questions, if you can write them and then pass them underneath or send one of the children to bring them to the front inshallah ta'ala, entertain those questions as well. Anybody have any questions about what's covered? Either being very thorough and mashallah, or like nobody is interested in the topic. Yes?
So, with regards to the travel, so what do you mean, for example, you're flying out, when you start the fast in the morning, and then 9 o'clock, let's say in the morning, if you fly out, you're flying internationally, when do you really break your fast? So, according to your local, where you at?
Okay, very good question. If a person begins their fast while they're not traveling, they haven't traveled yet, and then they travel during the day, and they're going internationally, and sometimes the day can get stretched out very long if you're traveling internationally. In those cases, actually exceptional cases, you'll actually, and this is one of the best practices, to inquire about your specific circumstance with a scholar who can tell you in which case actually there is dispensation where a person will not fast. There are differences of opinions on this issue of whether or not a person can fast on that day. And also there are differences, there are certain dispensations or rukhsas that are allowed when a person is traveling in extraneous circumstances. Meaning that they may be traveling with the sun, which means that they travel, and that it's daytime for the entire journey, which may sometimes be a very long journey. And sometimes, subhanAllah, actually, this has happened several times. I've heard of these cases now. Just recently, there are these now. I think these planes that go direct from India to Chicago. Have you ever heard about these ones? It's 14-hour flights, right? And people have died. Elderly individuals have passed away because of the difficulty of these journeys. And so sometimes people like to argue that they counter-argue that the spirit of the dispensations in the Sharia, the ease with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cuts the salah in half and allows Muslims not to fast when they're traveling. They say now it's so easy, so now we should actually not be using those dispensations. Actually, sometimes even these journeys in air-conditioned airplane, for somebody in a certain case, would be so difficult that it causes them to pass away. There are people that have, this is not just the first time I've heard this, if this was just one case, I would have thought that this was an isolated incident, but I've heard several people, elderly, that were traveling, sometimes they were sick and they were traveling to the United States to get treatment, but the difficulty of travel was so hard for them that they passed away upon arriving. So sometimes what you have to do is look at the specific case and then consult with somebody and see if there's a dispensation for that person. Any other question?
Yeah, but not asking for a rukhsa, but rather the ruling on breaking the fast. Do you follow your local leather or not leather, your time?
No. So where would you get the question? The follow-up question, actually, the proper question that I didn't answer was whether or not how do you break your fast? So just like you offer your salah according to where you are currently, you will look outside and see whether the sun is set yet, and according to the current location that you are in, you will break the fast accordingly. If the sun doesn't set, right, then there are places very north, right, of the equator where the sun doesn't set for 6 months. In those cases, then of course, this is where then you estimate time based upon some other location, and then you can break your fast accordingly. Now, if a person is actually fasting, and they get up to, this is one of the issues that's I think coming up. If a person is fasting and they come upon such difficulty that they are not able to complete the fast, and they are certain that it's going to cause them such harm that would have excused them, then they should break their fast. They should break their fast. Sometimes people, for example, there was one incident I remember when I was studying in Pakistan, and they don't get like first aid training there. So there were some kids were playing soccer. There were some Gilgiti kids, a Gilgiti student who was from like the border of Pakistan and China. Those people had like even less education than people in the villages. So he got hit by a soccer ball, full force on his nose, and he was bleeding. And I was just passing by and I saw that he was hunched over a sink, and they were trying to like get all the blood out. I said, "What are you guys doing?" He said, "Well, we're trying to get all the blood out." I said, "You're going to bleed him to death." Yeah. He said, "Why aren't you holding his nose and putting his head up?" I was like, "Oh, he'll choke." So I was kind of amazing. First of all, I was thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that had that much basic education about like how to stop a nosebleed. But they didn't know how to stop a nosebleed, and he became so weak that he was standing over this sink, and he was being people because he was losing so much blood. So then I had explained to them, this is how you should stop the nosebleed. And he was fasting. So he wanted to continue his fast. I said, you can't even stand up, we're going to continue the fast. And I had to call the teachers and force him to actually break his fast. So they had to send him to the hospital with that IV. But sometimes if you're actually not physically capable of completing the fast, it's not like it's extra hurt you in, harming yourself and causing damage to your body. You will actually be more rewarded if you break the fast in those cases. Any other questions? Yes?
The intention, can you make the intention for the whole month of Ramadan also on the Ramadan times?
Can we make intention for the entire month of Ramadan? Intention, if you make intention for the entire month of Ramadan, that does not absolve one of making an individual intention for every separate fast, because every separate fast is considered a separate act, just like every salah is a separate act. And so the intention to fast the entire month, in addition to that, there has to be an individual intention. Now, if a person made an intention at the beginning of the month, and that state of consciousness of what I'm doing continued throughout the month, that would be considered an intention. The bare minimum of an intention, but that's an intention. So every day you're waking up for suhoor, you didn't explicitly state, I am, fasting today, or I'm fasting the following day, tomorrow, in the month of Ramadan. You don't make that explicit intention. But in your heart, of course, you woke up because you were wanting to perform the suhoor for the fast, then that is considered to be sufficient and your intention is sound. So in that sense, yes, if you made an intention for the entire month and you continued in that state of conscious intention or purposefulness in your intention, then that will suffice, inshallah. Can we get blood tests during fasting? This actually question will be answered, inshallah, in the upcoming slides. Can you please repeat the rulings of intention? You said something about midday briefly. Okay, so the detailed rulings of intention. The only intention that must be made before the dawn is the intention related to a qadha fast. A qadha fast. Why? Because the following day is not necessarily a day of fast. Okay? What that means is that, like, let's say that I'm making up the fasts that I missed in the month of Ramadan, and I woke up, let's say it's the month of Sha'ban, and I'm making up a fast for the previous year. And I woke up really late, say, worst case scenario, you missed Fajr, and I thought, oh my God, half the day is gone, I might as well just fast today. You know what? I missed fast last year in the month of Ramadan, maybe I'm making one of those fasts. And you want to then make an intention after the day started to do a qadha of the month of Ramadan of the previous year, right? That would not be permissible. In order to make an intention for a qadha fast, you have to make that intention before dawn. However, if it's the fast of the month of Ramadan and you are in the month of Ramadan, meaning it's not qadha but ada, in that case, even if you did suhoor or you didn't do suhoor, but you prayed your Fajr Salah and you didn't eat anything during Fajr, right? Up to shortly before midday. And then you realized, oh my God, today's the first of Ramadan. Oh wait, but alhamdulillah, I didn't eat anything, I didn't drink anything. Now the question is, can I make an intention to fast and then complete the fast? Yes, in this case, because midday has not passed, it is permissible for such a person to make an intention now, and the fast would be complete. So in the case of the month of Ramadan, a fard fast of the month of Ramadan, and I'm not even talking about the kafara fasts, which also like Allah fast, and also what they call another fast, which is a vow fast, which I'm not going to talk about. So the month of Ramadan fast, if you make an intention before midday, even though you forgot to do so before dawn, the fast will be, inshallah, complete. So that was just a review of that issue.
Can you brush our teeth during daytime?
Good question, inshallah. That also hopefully will be covered. So what nullifies the fast? What nullifies the fast? An additional question is, when is kafara or expiation necessary? Kafara is the 60 days of continuous mutatabi fast, of the mutatabi'at, consecutive fast, one after the other, in which no break or pause can be allowed. 60 days of fast for missing purposefully one fast without an excuse. So what nullifies the fast, and if something nullified the fast, which of those things would necessitate kafara? This is the questions we're going to just talk about now, inshallah. The first category we'll speak about are those fasts which require qada, which means that they have to be made up, and a kafara. This is the worst case scenario. This is where you don't want to be. Because the kafara, if a person is physically capable of doing so, is 60 days or possibly 58 days. 2 months, shahrayn mutatabi'ain. 2 days or 2 months of consecutive fasting. That's 58 to 60 days. Right? So, and without any pause. And you have to make sure that you time it such that Eid doesn't fall in between. Because Eid is not considered an excuse. If you did it like that, you have to start over again. So, qada and kafara. If you cannot do so, then feeding you can't feed slaves anymore, but if you can feed the poor, and that would be also a form of kafara. But that's only when a person is physically incapable of fasting for 60 days. So, the first situation in which both qada and kafara will be necessary is when a person eats or drinks anything intentionally, even if it was medicine and not an emergency situation. Meaning intentionally knowing that it will break the fast, right? A person eats or drinks something, or also smokes something. Smoking also would also be included, but that's mentioned later. Number 2, intentional purposeful intercourse. During the day, just like eating or drinking, right? And there's no emergency situation where this would be necessary, so didn't have to mention that condition. That would also cause qada and kafara. Number 3, swallowing the saliva of a spouse. And again, this is one of those explicit issues. You're thinking, when is this going to happen? In the month of Ramadan, Sahaba radiallahu anhum came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they asked Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, is it permissible for us to kiss our wives? To kiss our spouse in the month of Ramadan? With one of the companions, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said yes. With another companion, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said no. Without getting into the details of that incident, what that means is that the Sahaba, this is a normal act between a husband and wife, regarding which the Sahaba did not feel ashamed to ask about these issues. The Sahabiyat, imagine this, women in their days, when not praying, would send their cloth in which they would collect the discharge, and they would send it to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to verify whether the color was that of hayd, or meant that color meant that the days are over. Can you imagine that? Imagine sending that to the Imam of the Masjid. But Rasulullah said about the women of the Ansar, that may Allah have mercy on the women of the Ansar, Haya did not prevent them from learning about their deen. The Prophet had a great amount of praise for the Ansar, that they were not afraid of, because this is the matter of the Akhirah. So these types of issues, if you're not going to learn it from the proper source, you're going to learn it at school, unfortunately, right? Or you're going to learn it from the wrong sources. So therefore, just to be very explicit, we're going to talk about some of these issues. If a person was engaged in some sort of foreplay, and swallow the saliva of the spouse, that would break the fast, cause qada and kafara. If there was no exchange of saliva, then of course even the fast doesn't break. The second category is where qada is necessary but not kafara, meaning you'll have to make up the fast, but there's no kafara. The first is eating something that is not normally consumed, meaning like a rock. A person just consumes a rock, or takes a bunch of dirt and puts it in their mouth. That's not something that's usually edible or eaten. Therefore, that would not qualify as something that would necessitate kafara. Number 2, breaking the fast due to intense hunger or thirst, which I spoke about, right? Meaning that you know you're not going to survive the day, and therefore you perform, or you eat something, and in that case, because there's necessity, you'll make up the fast and later on, but there's no kafara. Number 3, taking medicine in a life-threatening situation. Also does not necessitate kafara, but there is qada. Number 4, eating, drinking, or intercourse mistakenly thinking it is not dawn yet, or that it is past sunset. Because it was a mistake, the fast doesn't count, and if you realize your mistake, you'll make it up later on, and that will be qada, no kafara is necessary. And then lastly, in this slide, is breaking the fast after forgetful eating, drinking, or intercourse. Forgetful, by the way, mistaken eating is different. The difference is, if I eat something or drink something, not remembering that I am fasting, that will not even break my fast. But if I know I'm fasting and I accidentally doing madmada, rinsing my mouth in wudu, if water came into my throat and I swallowed it, I know that I'm fasting, but I mistakenly swallowed something. That will break your fast. That will break your fast in the madhab of Abu Hanifa rahmatullah. So there's a difference between mistaken eating and forgetful eating. If you didn't realize you were fasting and you ate or drank something, that is from Allah, that is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that doesn't even break your fast. But if you knew that you were fasting and accidentally swallowed something, that will break your fast, but alhamdulillah, there's no kafara, because it was a mistake. Right? You didn't remember that you were fasting, in that case then, your fast doesn't even break. But if you remembered you were fasting, you knew you were fasting, you mistakenly ate something, drank, or you had intercourse, and then you thought that, okay, so then that will break your fast, and there's qada but not kafara. What happens in this scenario when you think that forgetful eating, forgetful drinking, or forgetful intercourse broke your fast? So somebody ate something, or they drank something, or they had intercourse, and they thought, oh, this must have broken my fast, even though they were doing so forgetfully. You get the scenario? So they thought that their fast was broken, but as I just mentioned, their fast wasn't even broken, because they didn't know that they were fasting at that time. They didn't realize that they were fasting at that time, they forgot. That means their fast should continue. But they mistakenly thought that my fast must be broken because I ate something. And then they eat again, but this time knowing that they're eating something when they should be fasting. So breaking the fast after forgetful eating, drinking, or intercourse, thinking that the fast was broken, meaning mistakenly thinking that the fast was broken. Now there's qada, but again no kafara, because this is again a mistake. So their fast was fine, but they didn't know that it was fine. Eating food stuck between the teeth and larger than a chickpea, or not larger than a chickpea. I should say not larger, I'm sorry. So eating food that is stuck between the teeth, right? If you have food stuck between the teeth and you didn't get a chance to brush your teeth before suhoor ended or before Fajr began, and you swallowed that small piece of morsel of food while you were fasting, that does not break or does not require, it's larger than a chickpea. Now I understand why that actually it was correct. So in this case, if it is larger than a chickpea is like chole, right? One dana. If you have that size of a chickpea in your mouth, and it was stuck in between your teeth, someone lost a tooth and he got stuck in there, right? If it was larger than a chickpea,
chickpea is white one and black one.
Anyone.
No, two sides.
That's actually a good point. It's a good point.
The black one is chana.
The reason that they mention this is because this is normally the size, the maximum size of something that would get stuck between the teeth. So some people have large gaps in between their teeth, right? I think the largest thing that the fuqaha would declare as like something that would be validly stuck between the teeth and not like abnormally stuck between the teeth would be a chickpea. Now, is it cooked? Is it like, when you cook it and you boil it, then it expands? I guess you get the idea. Something that could get stuck in between your teeth, and it is stuck in between your teeth, and you swallow that will not break your fast. What this is talking about is qada, not kafara. So if it's larger than that, it was in your mouth, under your tongue, right? It was in your mouth, you just didn't rinse it out, and then during Fajr you accidentally swallowed it. But it was a large morsel of food. That will break your fast. You'll have to do qada, but there's no kafara. Does that make sense? I hope I didn't confuse by mentioning the larger and smaller than a chickpea. So if it's smaller than a chickpea, then your fast will not break. If it's larger than a chickpea, you swallow it during your fast, the fast will break, but there's only qada. Next, taking food out of the mouth and then swallowing it regardless of the size. So there was something in your mouth and you you're like flossing your teeth and you look at it and you say, oh, there's something in my finger, and then you swallow it. But it was smaller than a chickpea. But because you took it out of your mouth, you put it back in your mouth, now it will break your fast. But there's no kafara. There's only qada. Swallowing water while excessively gargling. Mistakenly swallowing water, of course. This will also break the fast, necessitate qada, but not kafara. Ejaculation due to other than intercourse. Foreplay, for example. Or somebody, let's say, was lifting a heavy object, and some people, they have a medical condition, they cause a stimulation, and they have what they call inzal. If that takes place, but it wasn't because of intercourse, that will break the fast, but there's only qada. And lastly, masturbation. This is not considered to be intercourse. So it does break the fast. There is a qada, but there is no kafara. There is no kafara in this case. Another very common question that is asked, of course, usually in private. Qada and not kafara include, again, insertion of anything into the private parts, even for medical reasons. So, a suppository, for example. Right? If something needs to be inserted for medical reasons into the private parts, it will break the fast, but there's no kafara. The beginning of menses, menstruation, or postnatal bleeding, the lochia. These will also necessitate qada but not kafara. Deliberately vomiting more than a mouthful will also necessitate qada but not kafara. Swallowing toothpaste or mouthwash, and here's why I want to answer that question. So swallowing toothpaste or mouthwash, even accidentally, of course, will necessitate qada but not kafara. If you do it on purpose, then most scholars would say because it's not normal food, that it would not be considered, unless it's mouthwash, and some people get drunk on it and they consider it to be. When I was in college, I went to college, saw a lot of really weird stuff. Sometimes they couldn't get access to alcohol, they would drink mouthwash and get drunk on that. And just so you know, some people do that. If that was the purpose, if that was the case, and they intentionally drank mouthwash for that reason, then of course that would necessitate kafara. Otherwise, there's qada but not kafara. Brushing the teeth. So I spoke to several GIs and other experts in the medical field about whether or not toothpaste actually enters the throat or the stomach. A reliable GI, actually my own GI, he actually said that it doesn't enter the stomach. And he's certain, he does this all the time. He said if it did, then we wouldn't be able to operate, and so I can tell you that it doesn't. However, he failed to mention that it does enter the throat. It does enter also potentially the esophagus. If that's the case, and from what I have, my conclusion so far has been that using toothpaste while you're fasting is not recommended because traces of it do get into the cavities. If that's the case, you shouldn't use toothpaste while you're fasting. You can brush your teeth with a miswak or with a toothbrush, but you shouldn't use toothpaste. I do know that some scholars have said that toothpaste does not break the fast. That is not my personal opinion or practice, so I don't encourage that, but if someone is following those rulings, that's fine, they can follow that ruling, that ijtihad. However, the more precautionary ruling is that, and according to the research that I have come across, toothpaste does enter the cavities, even in minute amounts, and so therefore it should be avoided while you're fasting. You can do, of course, you can use toothpaste before you're fasting, before you begin your fast, before dawn, but not during the fast. Mouthwash, I don't have any research, unfortunately, on mouthwash and whether it enters into the throat, so I can't give you the ruling on that. Inhaling medicine through the nostrils. You purposefully inhaling medicine, right, through the nostrils, which enters then into the throat, that will break the fast and necessitate qada, but not kafara. And the reason why this is different from other medicines is because it's not being taken or ingested normally. And trace amounts of it will enter into the cavities, not in all of the medicine. Okay, what doesn't break the fast? These are the most common examples. I collected these based upon the questions that I come across and the questions that come up in many books of fatwa. This doesn't cover all of the things that don't break the fast that people mistakenly think do break the fast. So we talked about what necessitates qada and kafara, what necessitates qada but not kafara. Now the final discussion is what doesn't even break the fast, right? This actually, I believe, is the last discussion, and we should be done, inshallah, by 10:10. What doesn't break the fast? Number one, eating or drinking forgetfully, which I spoke about. Number two, eating what is between the teeth and less than the size of a chickpea. Number three, tasting leftover traces of medicine in the mouth or throat. Oftentimes when you take medicine before beginning the fast, you can still taste, because of the nature of the medicine, it coats the mouth, it coats the tongue sometimes, And so you can still taste trace amounts of those medicines while you're fasting. That will not break the fast. Those trace amounts are considered to be negligible. Number 4, dust or smoke that enters the throat without one's doing. Meaning not smoking, that will actually break the fast and necessitate kafara. But like you're driving, in Pakistan, like if you drive in certain places, like if you spit out after you've like motorcycle ride, like you can actually see like your saliva is all black because there's so much dust in the air, right? Or sometimes pollution is so heavy that like when you wash your face out, you actually do wudu, it looks like there's actually a purpose for washing your face because there's like the whole sink is black. There's so much dust in the air. So if there's dust or smoke in the air that accidentally gets into one's throat, right, then that does not even break the fast. A mosquito or fly entering the throat without one's doing. You were talking to someone, all of a sudden a mosquito went in the throat. Again, Pakistan examples, I've had that happen when I was fasting. The mosquito just, shoots up your mouth or nose, and you accidentally swallow it. Those don't even break the fast. Swallowing a few drops of tears or sweat will also not break the fast. Swallowing saliva or phlegm. Very common question. A person collects phlegm in their mouth, collects the saliva in their mouth, and then they swallow it to moisten the mouth, for example. Does that break the fast? When I was in college, somebody told me that it does. And this guy would always carry a bag with him, and he'd be spitting all the time in the month of Ramadan. And when we would be sitting in an apartment, he would have a garbage can next to him, and every few minutes he'd be spitting in the garbage can. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, don't you know that saliva can break your fast?" I said, "Allah shukr, is that fucking mashallah." Deemed difficult for us because if people actually would make your own saliva, right, a nullifier your fast, the religion would be very difficult. So even phlegm, which builds up in the throat or in the mouth, if you swallow that, that will not break your fast. Swallowing vomit that emerges in the mouth without like intentionally doing so, even if a mouthful. So if a person vomited, but not enough, like if you vomit but not so much that it's forced out of the mouth, right? Sometimes like you just vomit in your mouth a little phlegm, a little bile gets into the mouth, and you swallow it back. That will not break your fast. Even though it came out of your stomach, went into your mouth, and you went back down. As long as it doesn't exit the mouth and then go back in, which I don't know why you do that, but let's say that the vomit was to leave the mouth and then come back in, that would break the fast. But if the vomit stayed within the mouth and it was not more than a mouthful and you didn't intentionally do so, then that will not even break the fast if you swallow it back.
That means if you vomit, it comes out of the mouth, that doesn't nullify.
So, did we not talk about vomit? I don't want to get into that yet. If I've already come across it. Let me get back to that. If you swallowed intentionally more than a mouthful, then it falls into that category which is halal. If you swallowed a mouthful, if you vomited a mouthful, but not intentionally, that will also not break your fast. Using miswak. And the reason why using a miswak, and to clarify that using a miswak doesn't break the fast, is because when you use a normal miswak, the actual toothstick, pieces of the miswak will remain in your mouth very often. It will get stuck in between your teeth. Sometimes when you're praying, you'll feel it in your mouth. If you swallow those small pieces of the miswak, that will not break your fast. Okay? Swallowing blood from gums that doesn't dominate the saliva. What does that mean? If you swallow blood that's mixed with your saliva, but it's a small amount of blood, meaning that if you were to spit it out, the color of the blood would not dominate the saliva. It would not be the dominant color. There would be a little red there, but it wouldn't be very, very red. It wouldn't be like, it looks like blood. In that case, where the blood dominates the color of your saliva, in that case, then, swallowing that blood will not even break your fast. It's considered a negligible amount of blood. Backbiting. Backbiting negates the spiritual reward of the fast, but it doesn't break the fast legally speaking. So you don't get a reward for it, but you still have to continue the fast. There was a person that would always be breaking their fast and eating during the day, and he said, "What happened? I was backbiting in the morning, and so I broke my fast." Like, I think you did it on purpose. This is happening so often, right? Maybe you're just backbiting so that you So backbiting negates the reward, but not the actual legal validity of the fast. And then looking at something haram. This is also a very common misconception, that if you look at something haram, that will break your fast. That will not break your fast. Okay? Even if you look at, and this is not haram, but if a person was to look at their spouse, and the awrah of the spouse, that will not break the fast. Another common question. That if looking at the awrah of the spouse, does that break the fast? If it was uncovered, it does not break the fast. Performing intercourse forgetfully. This is a technical legal issue. I don't know how often this will happen to people, but if forgetfully a person didn't realize it was the month of Ramadan, or that they were fasting and they performed intercourse without realizing it, that they were fasting, it doesn't even break the fast. Wet dreams. A person went to sleep during the day and they had ihtilam, a wet dream, right? Discharge at night or during the sleep. And they wake up, they will perform a ghusl, but their fast is still valid. Istinja with water. Istinja with water, why is this mentioned? Because oftentimes people exaggerate in their istinja. And people then get afraid that if water is entering, right, the cavity, would that break the fast? If you're just doing istinja, right, and istinja should be done without insertion, then